sleep you need.
President Trump condemning the removal of Confederate monuments as sad and foolish. I want to discuss this now with Alfred Brophy. He's a law professor at the University of Alabama and author of University, Court and Slave, Pro-Slavery Thought in Southern Colleges and Courts and the Coming of Civil War. And Michael Higginbotham is here. He's a professor of constitutional law at the University of Baltimore and author of Ghosts of Jim Crow, Ending Racism in Post-Racial America. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming on. Al, I need to start with you because the president tweeted about statues this morning saying that it's sad to see history and culture of our great country being ripped apart with the removal of beautiful statues and monuments. When the president uses words like our, the history and culture of our country, our beautiful statues, who is he referring to?
Well, I think he's referring to the descendants of people who fought for the Confederacy and tried to memorialize it. One of the things about his tweeting was he was saying we all should remember our history, and I wish we'd get to that process, right, of remembering what the legacy of the Confederacy meant, and talking about the way in which the Civil War was a war to promote slavery.
And those statues, because those statues didn't come about, many of them, until Jim Crow, and some of them during the Civil Rights Movement, as as a fear tactic, right? To try to scare people, and because Southern whites were upset about their changing culture. It had nothing to do with coming, during the time of the Civil War.
Well, and to celebrate the era of the Confederacy and the war fought to promote slavery. I mean, I think that's the sort of interesting piece of this, and why I think probably we should be trying to preserve some of these statues, because they are reminders of the bad old days.
Michael, what do these statues represent? He said it's a reminder of the bad old days. What do they represent?
Well, I think they represent, as was mentioned, they represent white supremacy. They represent standing up for segregation. They represent anti-civil rights. And many of these statues were put up not at the Civil War time, but they were put up during the Civil Rights Movement. They were put up during Jim Crow to represent that white supremacy and that anti-integration.
Yeah, and it's very similar to, people talk about the flag, and one would think, and I held up the flag at the beginning of the show, you would think like right after the Civil War that everyone around the South was running around with the flag, and even during the Civil War with the Confederate flag. That is indeed not so. I think the Confederate flag that we have now is like the second or third, it was like the third or fourth iteration of the flag, and it was actually Robert E. Lee's infantry flag. It had nothing to do with it had very little to do with the Confederacy of the South overall. And as a matter of fact, the flag, not until the 1940s it began to appear frequently out of context and unrelated to the Civil War, like the University of Mississippi football games. But somehow history has been rewritten about the flags and these statues and these monuments, and I think it has a lot of people in this country, especially Southerners, believing it's Southern pride or believing in a fake history. Which do you think should be taken down? Any or all of them? Do you think they should, Michael? All of them should go, or any of them should go?
I think this is a very easy call. Just like the flag, Confederate monuments on state ground, state property, they need to be taken down. They need to be moved, as some of the relatives of these individuals, descendants of them, said, need to be moved to museums or private property. It's about education, not celebration for these Confederate monuments.
Is it common to have statues and monuments for people who are lost, the people who lost the war? Why would we do that? I mean, do we do it for, the Revolutionary War with, some of the people who were fighting on the British side? We don't see monuments erected to them. Al?
So there are occasional monuments to the British, which I think were put up, sort of between World War I and World War II as a sort of trying to celebrate Anglo-American connections. But I actually think we're going to see monuments taken down, right? The corollary to the idea that there's nothing so powerful as an idea whose come is there's nothing so powerless as an idea whose time has passed. And I think after Charlottesville, we're going to see monuments taken down. I do think there's a danger with this, though, because I fear that though, as my friend Michael Higginbotham points out, they're monuments to white supremacy and they're injurious in many ways. I think we need to preserve some memory that once the people who were in power throughout the South celebrated the Confederacy. I think the monuments are important historical artifacts.
I want to play this before we leave, because I was in Columbia, South Carolina, when that Confederate flag came down from the State House weeks after the shooting at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. 9 people were killed in that, as we know. This is what then candidate Donald Trump said at the time.
I think they should put it in the museum, let it go, respect whatever it is that you have to respect because it was a point in time, and put it in a museum. But I would take it down, yes.
A quick answer from both of you. Why do you think that it was such a striking difference this week when it relates to monuments? First, you, Al.
I puzzle about that all the time. I'm not sure if there's something politically charged, helpful that Trump sees in this. I think he was right to we were right to take down the Confederate flag. I see the monument issue as a little bit different.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's politically motivated. I think, the president is attempting to change the direction of this conversation because so many Americans are against what he said about Charlottesville.
All right. Thank you all. And before we go to break, I just want to put something up, and this is, if you guys in the control room can put this up, 2 articles that I'd like everyone to read, because in just 2 or 3 minutes we can't get everything in we'd like to talk about. One is from The Atlantic, and it's called The Myth of the Kindly General Lee. The Myth of the Kindly General Lee. And it talks about the legend of the Confederate leader's heroism and decency is based in fiction of a person who never existed. I would implore all of you to read that. And then there's another one which talks about how Germany responds to blood and soil politics. And this one is from The Economist. And it talks about how Germany deals with that, how every elementary school child in Germany has to visit a Holocaust site and a memorial site, and how they deal with remembrance rather than erecting statues of Hitler and the Third Reich and Nazis. They deal in remembrance in Germany. Please read those articles. I think you'll find them fascinating. You'll learn a lot. When we come right back, demonstrators